کنفرانس در پارلمان انگلستان. بحران اتمی و نقض حقوق بشر در ایران، اعتصاب غذا و کارزار جهانی برای آزادی 7 گروگان اشرفی و حفاظت از لیبرتی. 10 دسامبر 2013، 19 آذر 1392.
We know full well from the horrific footage we saw of the attack that 52 residents were brutally massacred on the 1st of September. We know also, tragically, that such massacres are nothing new for the Iranian regime, and shockingly, they are becoming all too common in al-Maliki's Iraq. The current Iranian regime, from Khomeini to Khamenei, and from Khatami to Rouhani, has had as a policy for survival the total suppression of opposition. Since we came to power, his regime has executed over 400 people. He himself has been involved with the Secretariat of the regime's Supreme National Security Council for over 16 years and has been at the heart of Khamenei's policies. This is not a moderate. This is just another member of the regime with the painted face of a moderate. And what lies behind that painted face is all of the evil that this so-called theocracy has delivered for its people. So let's not be taken in by the face of moderation when behind the face lies still all of the evil and all of the involvement in that evil of the man they call the president. You will know that whilst he's been a member of the Supreme National Security Council of Iran, we've seen torture, we've seen execution, we've seen the denial of basic freedoms for the people of that country, and we've seen support for international terrorism. And finally, we have seen, and have no doubt about this, the attempt to acquire nuclear weapons in direct contravention of international treaties. The appeasers and apologists for the regime will try to tell you that all we should care about is ensuring that Iran does not obtain military weapons. The truth is, Iran came to the table in a weak position, desperately needing sanctions relief. I believe, however, that we will see very shortly that it's the same old Iran, dealing in the same old way, with no care for human rights, a medieval theocracy that acts with all the terror of the Inquisition. And that's what we are dealing with. We must, however, demand the full implementation of all the Security Council resolutions, particularly the complete halt to uranium enrichment, complying with the additional protocol and allowing the IAEA inspectors unhindered access both to the nuclear centres and facilities that we know about and the nuclear centres that we only suspect. Sadly, I believe the policy of appeasement has also clearly influenced the West's stance on the issue of Camp Ashraf. We must be wary of the policy of appeasement, and we have to deal with an Iran based on hard facts and not empty promises. Sanctions have had a huge impact on the Iranian regime's access to finance, and it is that finance which fuels the regime's nuclear weapons program. Sanctions and the Iranian people's protests are what brought the regime to the negotiating table. David Cameron and William Hague should now be publicly demanding the release of the Campaign 7 hostages. If they have any decency about foreign policy, they should be doing that. We want to see real action from the British Foreign Office, and unless we get it, And unless we get it, we will feel totally let down. I will feel totally let down by the government that I support. So let the message go from this place. That is what we want. That is what we expect.
It is with great sadness and anger that I come here today. However, in the time that I've come to know the Iranian opposition and the Camp Ashraf residents, I know that with bravery and strength there is always hope. The Iranian opposition has faced crushing numbers of executions, torture and persecution and suppression. However, those who have been oppressed have come back stronger. They have faced being labelled and blacklisted by the West. However, they fought that battle, won and came back even stronger. The Iranian regime and Iraqi authorities should be under no illusions. They will not be able to crush the willpower of the Iranian opposition, and they will never crush the Iranian people's demands for freedom, justice and mercy and democracy. Our demands in relation to the 7 hostages over there and the residents of Camp Liberty are simple. The reason they are in their current situation is because the United States of America and the United Nations broke multiple promises to protect them. Over 100 have been killed, and still the United States and United Nations failed to protect these dissidents. However, our government cannot absolve itself of its responsibilities. We were a key ally in the Iraq war, and we have a duty as an international player. Our Prime Minister and Foreign Secretary must seriously and decisively demand that the Iraqi government release the 7 hostages and insist that Camp Liberty be protected by United Nations forces. Despite lies and cover-ups by Maliki and his futile attempts to deny that his government is not holding 7 Ashraf hostages, our government must make him accountable and hold him responsible for the immediate release of the Ashraf hostages and for their safety and security. Unfortunately, the current stance on the hostages in Camp Liberty is indicative of the current policy towards the Iranian regime. For far too long we have danced around the Iranian regime. We have given the Iranian regime concession after concession, and still the regime continues unopposed with its development of its nuclear capabilities. Time, ladies and gentlemen, is running out in relation to the nuclear programme's development, and we must maintain vigilance when dealing with Iran. We need to support the democratic aspirations of the Iranian people and their organised and democratic opposition movement to change the regime through supporting Mrs. Rajavi's third option. So finally, ladies and gentlemen, the people of Iran have long faced horrific human rights abuses, and this has not changed under the new president. We must not forget that the Iranian president has been part of this regime for a very long time. He has been at the forefront of crackdowns on student protests in the 1999 uprising, and under his leadership to date, 400 people have been executed. We should not be hailing this man as someone who we can do business with without being aware of his history and his relationship with the past regimes. He is simply the new so-called respectable face of the same regime. Perhaps even, ladies and gentlemen, a smiling assassin. Our policy towards the regime should be forceful. We must demand that the regime stop supporting terrorism. We must demand that the regime stops providing Syria with military and financial support to suppress its people. We must demand that the regime back its influence in Iraq and stops work on its nuclear weapons programme. We must demand these things, and if the demands are not met, the regime should be isolated and face sanctions. Our government, alongside others, has a clear duty to intervene in the case of Camp Liberty and the 7 hostages. Our Prime Minister and Foreign Secretary must publicly demand the release of the hostages, and they must pressure the United Nations into providing protection for Camp Liberty. Failure to do so will result in further loss of innocent lives. These are the lives of the bravest people of Iran, people who have dedicated their entire lives to the battle for freedom and democracy in their homeland. Not only should we be protecting them, we should be supporting their demand.
I have been coming to these meetings for quite a long time, 8.5 years. I was elected at the same time, and I want to thank everybody for this meeting today on the occasion of International Human Rights Day. And of course, I too, like others who have been outside the American Embassy, praising the dedication and commitment of some of the people here today, demanding the release of those 7 Ashrafi hostages, demanding UN protection at Camp Liberty. And continue the call on our government and the international community to condition any and all agreements on negotiations with the regime on a full halt to the use of the death penalty and torture in Iran. Inside Iran, the regime has been at war with the Iranian people through its human rights violations, those daily executions, the arrest of thousands of people, taking away the freedoms that we believe and support here, the filtering of the internet, and young people denied the opportunities to communicate and hear messages that we enjoy in this country and elsewhere in the West. The main conflict between the regime and its people revolves around the fact that the mullahs continue to usurp popular sovereignty, a regime that has been condemned 60 times at the United Nations for its flagrant human rights violations. I want just finally to congratulate, if that's the word, the people of Ashraf and Liberty, to salute those 7 hostages wherever they are. We demand nothing less than the release of those 7 people.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, friends, rather than go thousands of miles to Iran at the moment, I want to go a few hundred yards across the road to our own Foreign and Commonwealth Office, to the Prime Minister's and the Cabinet Office. And I want to ask, have we not to own up, those of us who are British citizens, however ashamed we may be, have we got not to own up to the fact that we have failed the people of Iran? During the past month, I've actually met the Deputy Prime Minister of Iraq. He was here, a guest here, speaking to members of Parliament, members of the Lords. I've written to him once a week, every week since that, about the 7 hostages. I've had one acknowledgement to my first message: sorry, I'm not back in Iraq yet. He stood, when I confronted him, as I confronted the Foreign Minister, he stood and he said, well, you know, we don't know, but I'll see what I can find out. The reality is, he's escaped from here, and like our own government, out of sight, out of mind. Ladies and gentlemen, have got to concentrate our efforts at home, on the Foreign Office, on William Hague, who has been silent. We criticise the United Nations. The United Nations is an agency that works on behalf of sovereign governments like the United States, like the United Kingdom, and it is within their sphere of responsibility that we have got to make changes. Then, and I must acknowledge those people who are sitting here with their on hunger strike. I said to them before, I say to you again, I remember you each day in my prayers. I hope that what you're endeavouring will bear success. I'm tired of repeating myself. I'll never tire of supporting you. God bless you all. I wish you well.
Well, it would be surprising if I had anything useful to say after having heard so much and so much eloquence from so many splendid people. And so therefore I would endorse what Brian said and what Lord McGuinness said as to the pressure that needs to be placed on government to make its voice heard. We need action as well. And I would have said that it was a mistake to lift sanctions, that the sanctions perhaps even should be intensified with a direct focus on the issues that are being discussed today. Of course, there are major issues of international law here and clear violations of international law by both the Iranian regime and by the Iraqi regime. And this, I think, is the problem. When we talk about human rights, we have to recognise that human rights trumps politics, or it should trump politics. Human rights is above politics. And politicians should not be prepared to sacrifice or compromise human rights for diplomatic or political reasons in order to gain advantage or make political gains. And the fundamental abuses of human rights that are being perpetrated by these two regimes, then they have to give that priority, they have to put that first, and they have to act to condemn and to stop those human rights abuses. I shall just say one thing, that I feel great humility in the presence of people who have been on hunger strike for so long, and it's very easy for lawyers and indeed for politicians to pontificate and talk, but when it comes to the sort of action that you are taking, that requires real courage, real dedication, and I can only hope that it will produce success that we all wish for. Thank you very much.
Suffice it to say that I believe, and we as a party believe, that these injustices have been going on for far too long. And I hope that, given that there is now a consensus across the political spectrum within both houses of Parliament, that we might be able to bring pressure to bear now to end the tyranny that is going on. I can only imagine what you are going through. I can only just imagine it, but I do know that many people are in huge sympathy with you, and that it seems to me that what we need to do is follow the example of the House of Lords, but also with Brian and House of Commons, to raise this issue as often and as consistently as we possibly can. I wish you well in your endeavours. I know these things do not happen overnight, but they will never happen unless we all work together and we continue with the pressure to ensure that governments live up to basic human decency. Because that's really what we're talking about. Thank you.